All right, well, welcome in everybody. If we haven't met yet, my name is Faye and I'm from Wing Canvas. We're a YouTube channel and an online art school specializing in illustration. So today we will be drawing human proportions and learning how to draw a male, female, and child proportions. So I have a example of sort of what we're going to be drawing today. And I hope you'll draw along with me. So if you are working traditionally, great. If you are working digitally, I assume you guys are all on the XPPen server. So you will be working digitally. Um, but you can do this in any medium. And digital art is obviously a lot easier because you don't have to um, worry so much about, eraser shavings and you can clone things I actually use an XP Pen Artist Pro 15.6. And so I've been using it for a long time. And yeah, I really enjoy using a mix of digital and traditional art. All right, so we're also going to have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end, including content requests for future workshops and questions. If you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, and I will answer them at the end. So we'll have about 10 minutes at the end. Okay, so just to talk a little bit about human proportions. The average female and male proportions, we really measure out with heads. So let me know if you are a beginner. This tutorial is really designed for beginners, so it's not really designed for, super advanced artists, although it's a good refresher if you don't really draw a lot of human proportions. But to get started, human proportions are all measured with heads. And it just serves as a really easy way of mapping out the proportions of a female, a male, and a child. And so what we're going to do is we are going to draw an adult female, an adult male, a child, and if we have time, we can get into an elderly woman or a baby. But we will revisit this tutorial in a minute, or this demo. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw a head together. Okay, so the way I like to draw heads are ball and shield. So if you draw a ball and a shield shape like this, right? Usually speaking, the shield is about 1/3. So from here to here, it's about 1/3 in length. So you take half of the length of the ball, right? And then you add it to the bottom, and then so that there's your head shape. So then if we take this head shape and then we duplicate it. So so what I'm going to do is just move it down here. And I'm just going to keep cloning. Whoops. So, oh, sorry. All right, just give me a second here. I haven't done digital in a while. All right, so if you take the head and you basically move it down, right? So there's 3, and then we just keep cloning it and keep cloning it. I'm just going to merge these layers. Whoops. So basically what you can do is you can copy all of the heads, or you can, if you're drawing this traditionally, um, basically what you can do is, oh, sorry, we're just going to clone this. So you can use the head as a unit of measurement, right? So what then you could do is draw some lines all the way across. Oops. And then this is going to be your grid. So the last time I did this, it was with pencil and paper. But usually what we do is we would use a 7-head ratio. And usually I'll go 7.5 heads. So I will keep it to be about 7.5 heads at the very top. Okay, so then uh, a male head would generally be here, and then from here, what I would do is draw in the shoulders. And generally speaking, you can draw in a bit of an S curve. So an S curve will keep the body very, very dynamic. And then for male torsos, I generally like to draw them as boxy shapes like this, right? And if you really want to exaggerate male proportions, you can think about the rib cage as being 2 times the size of the head. So roughly about 2 times the size of the head, and it fits nicely into a box here. And then we'll draw the male pelvis. So the male pelvis is about the size of the head. So it's roughly the size of the head, right? So when I say the size of the head, it's more like the volume of the head. And then the leg would kind of come down straight like this. And then generally I'll find the halfway point for the knees, and then I will connect the legs. So male bodies are generally more square, and female bodies are more of that hourglass shape. So you can kind of see that the rib cage is a little bit wider than the hips or the pelvis. And then you can kind of draw in the thighs. So I like to draw in the thighs as cylinder shapes like this. And then the arms. So the arms, I see a lot of people when they draw the arms, they kind of connect it right to the rib cage, but I like to draw in 2 circles for the shoulders, and it's approximately the same size as the shield, right? So the bottom of the head. Then sometimes what I like to do is draw in the gesture of the arm, right? So whatever you want that arm to be doing, whether you want it to be relaxed, whether you want it to be bent, generally I will draw it as a bit of a curve or a combination of 2 lines that are equal in length. And if the arms are doing different things, then what you can do is you can kind of draw like a curve going across, just like I did with the knees, and then you'll figure out where the elbows are, right? So generally speaking, your hands will touch the bottom of the sorry, your hands will touch sort of midway on the thigh. Okay. Somebody once said, "Oh, my hands are a lot higher or a lot lower." And I like to say everybody's built differently. So, I have very short arms, uh, but some people have very, very long arms and it might go a little bit lower. But generally speaking, it goes about halfway along the thigh. Okay, so that's kind of like a male body. The real difference between a male and female body is the rib cage to pelvis proportion, as well as the neck. So male bodies have very thick necks, right? So I'm really going to exaggerate and make that neck almost the same size as um, or the same width as the face itself. So very, very wide. And then if your person is very muscular, right, then you can draw in uh, these muscles. They're really like the neck and back muscles. So it actually is behind that neck. But if they're not as muscular, you can make them a little bit smaller like this. Okay, so this is a very basic proportion drawing. Uh, the line of the nipple is generally about halfway on that rib cage. And it's a little bit higher on male torsos, and then the belly button is right in the middle. Okay, so pretty simple to do. You can just do these with very basic shapes. All right, so moving on to the female body. So for the female body, we're going to start it at halfway. So if this is 7.5 heads, then this is 7 heads. 7 heads high here. Okay, so we're going to draw a female body next. So I'm just going to choose a different color here. All right, so for female bodies, generally speaking, the head is the same. Right, so I draw it pretty much the same way. So if this is the middle here, so if I find the middle, right, that's approximately how big I want to draw the head, right? So whoops. So for the female body, I would also draw in the head and the ball and shield. But I'm going to make the face a little bit shorter. So when you're drawing children or you're drawing females, females and children tend to have just shorter, like a shorter jawline. It's just for that more, youthful looking um, it's kind of like a stereotype, especially when you're drawing like anime characters, right? The females tend to look more childlike. But I'm going to draw the S curve going the opposite way. And the reason why I draw the S curve is to give the body a little bit more of a gesture if it's standing, right? Because if you look at just a body standing straight up and down, it doesn't feel very dynamic. So I like to have these opposing curves or these opposing angles. So the S curve allows you to place the shoulders on a little bit of an angle and the hips on an opposing angle, right? So this allows you to give the torso a little bit more of that human touch. You'll notice that female pelvises and female torsos in general are a little bit longer because the female pelvis is larger, right, than the male pelvis, respectively. So if I'm sketching out the female rib cage, right, like let's say I simplify it into a box first. just to make it easy. You see how the box compared to the head is a lot smaller. So if the male torso is about 2 times the size of the head, the female torso is 1.5 times the size of the head, right? So I could kind of fit in 1.5 here. So these proportions matter a lot because they, even when you just distill the figure into very basic shapes, you can tell the gender of the figure with just proportions. So you'll notice that in the male figure, the rib cage and hips are very different, right? The rib cage is about 2 times the size of the hips, whereas the female body, the hips or the pelvis is roughly the same size as the rib cage, right? So by size, I mean like volume. And then you'll see that the box on the male torso is really just like a rectangle, whereas on the female torso, it's a little bit longer on the bottom. So it's slightly different in shape and in proportion. So you can already tell, even though this figure doesn't have a face, you can already tell that the figure looks more feminine. Okay, so for the legs, I'm going to do a similar type of thing. Usually there's one leg that's weight bearing and then another leg that is a little bit more relaxed, right? So the weight bearing leg is generally the leg that is tilted up, right? So it would be this leg here. And so if you know your anatomy, you kind of know that your legs are attached to the side of your pelvis. They're not actually attached at the bottom like those mannequins. They're attached to the side of the pelvis and then it comes down like this. So for the weight bearing leg, I'm going to draw it straight up and down, maybe slightly slightly tilted inwards so that the figure looks more balanced, right? And then the other leg that's more relaxed, I can put a little bit of a bend to it, kind of like that. And then the same thing, I'm going to find the middle of the leg, right? I draw this curve just because it helps with alignment, right? Like imagine the leg can kind of curve or like this person can do somersaults and put their leg up in the air, right? You'll still be able to find the middle of the leg if you draw a curve. So that's why that curve is important. Okay, so now I'm going to draw in the 2 cylinders. I know there was a glove that came with this tablet once upon a time, and I've moved a couple times, so I can't find this glove, and my hand is very, it's kind of sticky today because it's very hot out. So it's making my process a little bit weird. All right, so I'm going to make this hand a little bit more relaxed. Maybe this hand I'm going to put on the hips like a power pose. Okay, so you can do whatever you want with the arm. You could have this arm kind of, interacting with the other person. As long as it has a bit of a curve and both arms are the same length. Okay, roughly the same length. So I think I'm going to make the arm go on the hip like this. For hands are generally about the size of that ball, right? So in the ball and shield, your hand is generally the length of the ball. So it's generally the size of your face. Okay, so if you do an experiment and you line up the bottom of your hand to your chin, the tip of your finger should be approximately your hairline. So if you keep that in mind, then your hands will most likely look proportionate. This hand is going to kind of be resting on the hip like that. And then I will draw in those cylinders. So another common thing that I see with figure drawing, common mistake is that the arms are drawn in very thick. So if you look at the proportions of arms and legs, right, compared to each other, the leg is probably I'm kind of measuring my arm right now with my hand, but my leg is at least 2 times the volume of my arm, if not 2.5 to 3 times the volume, right? So your legs are much, much thicker. So for example, if your arm is this thick, right? Or your upper arm is this thick, then your upper thigh is going to be about that thick, right? So you can see the difference in volume, right? So it's approximately 2.5 to 3 times the volume. So just keep that in mind when you are drawing the cylinders, otherwise the figure might look a little bit wonky. Okay, so female chests, the midline also is kind of halfway down the torso. Um, but if you are drawing female chests, um, it's a little bit tricky because a lot of the times I'll see people draw sort of a female chest like this. They'll draw 2 circles and then they kind of draw like a straight line, right? So they kind of look like targets, right? So chests don't really look like that. They're a bit more sort of oval shape, right? And they have a curve to them, so they're more like that. Okay, so if you're drawing in the line of the chest, just kind of keep that in mind to keep those circles on a bit of a tilt. I'm trying to draw them symmetrically here. um, kind of like that. All right. Again, belly button is in the middle, in between the rib cage and the pelvis. So these figures right now have a lot of lines going through them, but it's important to kind of keep in mind that your construction lines are really important because you want to draw through the figure. You don't want to draw just outlines, right? You want to think about your figure as if you're sculpting. So if you sculpt, um, generally speaking, if you are a sculptor or if you've ever sculpted something before, let me know in the chat if you have sculpted a figure before, if you've actually made an armature before, because drawing a figure is sort of like that. It's sort of like building a sculpture. So when you build a sculpture, you have to kind of build a wire frame, like an armature, right? You got to build like um, a structure underneath, right? So in other words, like if you're building a sculpture, you're not gonna just like start with the nose or start with the head. If you're building a sculpture, you would probably have to form a wire, you know, and then like put it on a plaque or a pedestal, right? And then you'd have to kind of like build out the rib cage. You'd have to like build out the torso. This would all be wire, right? And then you would attach like a wire here and then a wire here, and then 2 wires like this, right? Right? So this type of process is how you should be drawing. So that means mass first. Okay. The reason why that's important is because if you don't do that, like if you don't draw the mass first, then what ends up happening is your figure doesn't have any structure, right? So you don't want to do outlines first, you want to do mass first. You want to think about it as if you are building a sculpture. So think like a sculptor. This is really the key to good figure drawing because it gives you a really good understanding of how to construct a figure. Okay, I'm just going to keep that. Um, all right. So let's draw a child. So has anyone here ever drawn a figure? And let's say you were trying to draw a girl, but then it looked like a boy, or you're trying to draw a boy, but then it looked like a girl, or it looked like a child, and you're like, what did I do? What happened? um, so if that has ever happened to you, it's probably because of proportions. Okay, so let's draw a child. Um, if a female figure is 7 heads high and a male figure is 7.5 heads high, then a child would be 4 to 5 heads high, right? 4 to 5 heads high. Okay, I'm going to rename this layer. So I don't get lost. Okay. So I'm going to write this down. So a female would be about 7 heads high. And then a child, I'm going to draw the child in a slightly different color. Let's do a green. Okay. So I'm going to draw the child to be about 4.5 heads high. Okay. So it varies depending on the age of the child. So the younger the child, um, the less head size. Sorry, the smaller their body is compared to their head. So for a child, I'm trying to draw the child's head to be a little bit bigger. So you notice that the ball of the child's head is bigger than the ball on the adult head because the face is going to be, or the shield part is going to be even shorter. So you see on the male head, see how the shield is a little bit wider on the, or a little bit longer. On the female head, it's slightly shorter than the male head, and then on the child, it's like really, really small, right? The other thing that you could do is you can make the child's chin to be not as pointy, so it's kind of like round at the bottom. And you'll notice that I put the ears a little bit lower on the head, and that's because children's faces tend to sit a little bit lower on the head, right? So their eyes are a little bit lower, um, and their foreheads are a little bit bigger. And so this child here, I'm going to give them also just a little bit of an S curve, just a little. And when it comes to drawing children, their rib cages and pelvises they're a little bit more similar to male proportions, except they're just way smaller. So for a child, you'll notice that like I always draw the tilt of the shoulders and then I draw the tilt of the hips, and then they are usually opposing. So if the shoulders are going this way, then the hips are going this way. If the shoulders are going this way, then the hips are going this way, right? So that's because of counterbalance. If you are standing straight up and down and your weight is on both feet, it feels very unnatural. Usually speaking, when we're standing, we like to put our weight on one foot, right? So if you can stand up and just like shift your weight back and forth, you'll notice that your shoulders will also react to that. So if you shift your weight, your shoulders will naturally kind of shift and your hips will naturally shift. So your hips shift first and then your shoulders to kind of counterbalance that weight. So children's rib cages are about the size of their head, very small, right? It's roughly the same size as the head, and the pelvis is even smaller. Okay, so the pelvis is smaller than the head, and the rib cage is roughly the same size as the head. You can typically draw rib cages like an egg, right? It's kind of like an egg shape. It's a little bit pointier at the top and wider at the bottom, but generally shaped like an egg. Shoulders, again, children's shoulders are very small, so you can kind of take this distance here and draw in the shoulders. Okay, and then I'd like to turn the pelvis into a bit of an underwear shape and then add the legs. So this child has like an enormous head and very short legs. This is like probably the size of a toddler, right? Like 2 years old, probably about 2 years old. Um, really, really cute, but like very chibi, very funny looking at this age. Um, Actually, what I'm going to do, because children don't really have super long necks, um, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move the body up just a little bit. Just a little bit, like that. Because if you give a child a really long neck, they look kind of weird. The reason why they don't have long necks is because their heads are so big that if they had long necks, it would just fall over. So you gotta give them like a really, really small neck, nice and short. I'm gonna have this child doing something kind of silly. He's gonna be like, whatever. He's in the whatever pose. Um, Children's torsos are pretty boxy, very similar to male bodies, and it really doesn't matter the gender of the child. Boys and girls will have very similar proportions. So they start to change when, they hit the preteens, going through puberty, and then, bodies start to change a little bit. And that's when you'll start to see the differences. But generally speaking, kids are all pretty much the same. So you can't really tell the gender that easily like you can in the others. Okay, so same process for the arms. I'm just kind of drawing in the cylinder shapes, making sure that they're a little bit smaller than the legs. And remember how I said hands are roughly the size of the circle? Well, not for kids. Kids have like teeny tiny little hands. If I gave the kid a hand like that's the size of the cranium, right? They would look like they're wearing a baseball glove, like really big. So for children, their hands are probably I would say less than half of the size of their head. Like probably I would say between the middle part, um, the top of the ear to the bottom of the chin, approximately. So just so you know, the top of the ear is usually in alignment with your eye socket, right? So your eye sockets, if your eye sockets are there, the top of your ear would align with that, looking from the front. Give him a little belly button. Put in that nipple line here. There's the child. Okay, so one fun fact is that uh, with human proportions, there are things that you can always fall back on. So, for example, your foot is the same length as your forearm. So this is not true for children, though. Keep in mind, children are just different. Their proportions are very exaggerated. But generally speaking, if I was drawing this woman here, and I was drawing her from the side, right? Her foot would be the same length as her forearm, measured from the inside. If you think about a forearm, right? Let's say we draw in the two cylinders. Okay, so this is the upper arm and the forearm, and let's say this is the hand. Okay, and this is the elbow. So if you're measuring the proportions from the outside, it's actually going to be longer than the proportions from the inside, right? And that's because of the addition of the elbow. So don't mistake the foot measurement for the bottom or the outside. It's actually the inside of the forearm. Okay, it makes a big difference. So if her arm is like that, then her foot, if I was drawing her foot, generally like simplify it into a wedge shape, right? Wedge shape like that. It's roughly the same size as her forearm. So, like let's say I simplify this foot into a wedge shape, and then I will kind of draw out the arch like that. So if I'm drawing a foot from the front, though, I kind of just draw it like you can kind of see I kind of draw it like this shape with a little bit of depth here. Okay, so just something that you can keep in mind. I find it really, really helpful because I always see my students struggle with foot proportions. Um, they always make they always make feet too big or too small. Usually it's too small. Usually heads are too big. And so I think that it's really important to keep in mind. Oops. I just want to keep all of these for later, but I don't want it to affect my other drawings. Okay, so we have a male, we have a female, we have a child. I think we do have time to draw an elderly person. Let me know if you guys would prefer I draw an elderly person, or do you guys want to see facial proportions? Um, do you want to just see me draw a face, or are you more interested in seeing the body? Face? Okay. Elderly? Okay. Okay, we'll draw the face. All right. One thing about elderly people, let me just pull up my example here. So elderly people, you can kind of see the shoulders, right? The shoulders on elderly people are much higher, right? So no visible neck. The back is a little bit more slouched, and elderly people are just a little bit shorter. So if you're drawing a female, right? And a female is 7 heads high, then an elderly female might be 6.5 heads high. So they just lose a little bit of that neck from the slouching, and then the body tends to be a little bit rounder in the middle, lower nipple line. Shoulders are a little bit higher, and yeah, so generally speaking, it's all about the shoulder line. The shoulder line and where it aligns, you can kind of see it aligns with the mouth, right? That's the most important thing to remember. Okay, so let's draw some faces here. Okay. So let me know what you struggle with when you actually draw faces. Is it facial proportions? Because we only have time to draw a face from the front. If you do want to learn more about faces, we could do a separate workshop for that. I just want to be very mindful of our time. And then I can also link some resources because we actually, on our channel, we have a video on drawing um, faces. And so, uh, you can check that out afterwards if you're more interested in learning more about that. Okay, so let's draw in a male face here. So the difference between male faces and female faces are just that male faces are more angular. So if I follow my lines here, I just created a new layer and then I'm just going to follow my lines. But I'm going to make the male face to be a little bit more chiseled, right? So more chiseled chin, accentuated jaw. So you can see like I'm putting in a more angular jaw, right? So males have more angles. Males have more angles. That's it. That's all you need to remember. So I can draw in, sort of a more chiseled look for everything. And then the middle line is generally where the eyes sit. So, if you want to draw in the eyes, and then male eyebrows are a little bit thicker. Just a little bit thicker. I'm going to draw a very, very simplified face. Okay, this is not going to be that like super detailed. We can do a separate workshop for that. These are just facial proportions. The nose sits on the bottom of that circle, and then the mouth, typically I will just draw in a line for the mouth. A rough alignment is the corner of the eyes will align with the nose, and then the mouth will sit a little bit wider. Then I'll draw in the bottom lip there. Right, so very, very simple face. One tip for drawing eyes on males is like, let's say I give the eye more angles, right? Say I give the eye a little bit more of an angle. On female eyes can be a little bit more curved. Again, these are just exaggerations. It's just one way to make a face look more masculine or more feminine. just by using angles and curves. Okay, not to say that males don't have curves, but generally speaking, if you're just doing an illustration, right? If you're just illustrating and you want to get the idea across very quickly at a glance, then you may not want to put in a lot of curves on males or too many angles on females. You'll notice that the bottom of the eye is really, really light. Like you don't really want to make it a very thick or a very hard line at the bottom, unless you're trying to draw eyeliner, but it just, usually speaking, it's a lot thicker at the top because of the lash line and because the eyelid wraps around the eyeball. Okay, so there's just a general tip for drawing eyes. And then for hair from the front, you can just kind of draw in just a very simple kind of hairstyle, just simple guy hair. Again, actually, Wing Canvas is releasing a tutorial on how to draw hair using pencil, and it's going to be premiering on Tuesday, so you can check that out. You can get a lot more details on drawing hair. So our channel is just Wing Canvas. You can just look for us on YouTube and you'll see the upcoming tutorial. Okay, so this is a very young looking male face, right? If you want the face to look a little bit older, you can put in some lines here. But you'll see that like I didn't draw in these lines for the nose. Like a lot of people will draw in like heavy lines for the nose, right? And that's a no-no. um, because it just tends to look very strange. You only want to draw what is like necessary, right? You don't really need to draw all of the details. You just want to draw what is important. So if you did want to draw in a little bit of the bridge of the nose, it's better to just draw in a sort of like a suggestion, or kind of a broken line, right? It's a little bit more natural feeling than drawing in a thick, heavy line. The other thing you want to keep in mind when you are drawing eyes, let me just move this up a little bit. So the angles versus curves, this applies to male, female. So the angles versus curves applies to eyebrows as well. Okay, so maybe his eyebrows aren't that arched, but maybe they're like more like this. Okay, so male faces tend to have thicker eyebrows. The eyebrows tend to be a little bit closer to the eyes, and female eyebrows have more curves. They're generally thinner, right? So you can see just in these subtle differences, angles versus curves, you can already see a big gender difference. The other thing you might notice, especially in anime, uh, is, for example, with anime characters, the eyebrows are always like very close. Sometimes they're just like even touching the eyes, very, very close. And on female anime characters, the eyebrow is like really, really far away from the eye. Um, And again, those are exaggerations, but it just tends to make a character look more masculine versus feminine. So if you draw in the structure, then you can kind of follow through with the rest of the body. So as I render out this body, I'm going to invite you guys to ask any questions that you may have. If you have any questions about proportions or any comments, please let me know. So this is actually going to be the Q&A as I'm sketching out the body. Ears. Biggest struggle with eyes is getting the distance correct. Okay, lizard bean. Ears. So ears is definite, like ears, okay. Ears are important, but not really. They're only important because they tell you what the face is doing. Like if the ears are too high on the head, then it makes the head look like it's tilting down. If the ears are too low on the head, it makes the head look like it's tilting up. And generally, this is because, let me show you. So let's say I have a head here, right? Let's say I'm drawing a head, and let's say this head is 3/4 view, right? If I'm drawing a head. If I'm trying to draw a head really quickly, I draw in the ear and it connects with that jaw, right? It connects with the jaw, and then I'm very easily, able to place in the eyes and the nose based on the top and bottom of the ear. So the bottom of the ear is the nose, the top of the ear is sort of like the top of the eye socket, right? Like this. And if you're drawing a head, let's say you're drawing a head from the front, right? But your ears are really low, like if your ears are down here, right? That means that the nose is here, right? And the eyes are up here. And then the chin is here. Okay? If you're drawing a head and you're drawing the ears, but the ears are too high, say the ears are like up here, um, then that means that your nose is down here and your eyes would be here, right? So your ears really um, are an indicator of the direction of the head, okay? Uh, so if you're drawing head structure, yes, it's easier to draw the ears first. I draw the ball, the center line, the shield, the ears, then the nose and the eye sockets. That's kind of the direction. Um, you guys are doing great. Thank you so much for sharing your artwork. This is awesome. Okay, so somebody asked, which one do you prefer, digital art or traditional art? I prefer traditional art. As you can tell, I'm pretty rusty with digital, but I do use digital tools a lot. Particularly, I think that digital is really, really important for me to plan and sketch. So sometimes I'm like drawing something and I'm thinking about, you know, oh, I want to try out a different color scheme, or, I want to test out how something would look, um, or I want to try out a different outfit design or something like that. That's kind of when I would go and take my digital tools. And then I would usually take a photo or something and then, bring it in digitally and then kind of figure out what I want to do with it. So I use both, but I'm more of a traditional artist. Um, what about dinosaur proportions or general quadrupeds? Okay, so that is a different topic for a different workshop. Dinosaur proportions are very, very different, but lucky for you, we actually have a video. I believe it's a live stream on how to draw dinosaurs. And we have a very popular video series on how to draw animal characters. So basically hybrids, half animal, half human. We have a Jajinka series as well. Um, so if you're interested in that, you can Google that topic and at Wing Canvas and see if we already have it. If we don't have it, then let us know. We have a suggestions area on our Discord. Okay, so one thing I want to talk about when you're drawing calves is that calves are really tricky because the calf muscle is also on a bit of a tilt. So that means that it's not really, you know, straight up and down like this because it's tilted. That calf muscle is going to look different depending on what the foot is doing. Okay, so if this foot is from the side, I'm just going to make sure that it's approximately the same length as the arm. And here I'm just kind of making up the body as I go, just because I've drawn humans for a very long time. And when you do draw humans for a long time, then you can sort of make stuff up and it can just work. And obviously, it's much better if you start out with that armature uh, and drawing mass instead of trying to render all at once. So it's always better to build up those layers as you go. Question. Do you have any tips on drawing the hip and upper leg area? I struggle to make that area look three-dimensional. Do I have any tips on drawing the hip and upper leg area? Yes, draw the hip as a box. Make sure that that box makes sense in space. So what I didn't actually show you is how to draw a rib cage and hips from the side. So for example, if your rib cage is like this and your hips from the side are like this, okay? Can you see this is a female body, by the way. Um, but can you see that there's this shape in the middle? Can you see that this section is shorter than this section, right? That's really, really important. You don't want to have those boxes stacked. If you have the boxes stacked, then your figure looks super, super stiff, right? So you really want to make sure that you have this this compression in the back, elongation in the front. So you'll notice that when you're drawing in the the box, like the hips from the side, let's say your leg attaches from there. So the pelvis from the side, the pelvis is tilted. It's always tilted. So it's always tilted forwards, right? In a standing pose, it's tilting forwards. And so these bones here are your hip bones. So if you actually feel your hip bones, you can feel them sticking out, right? And then your sit bones, so when you're sitting on a chair, okay, those are your sit bones. So your sit bones and your hip bones are on opposite corners of the pelvis, which makes it that tilt, right? It gives it that tilt. So then if you're drawing the legs, right, think about an underwear shape. Like if you think about underwear, right, it's like this, right? Oops, like that. And if you think about male underwear and female underwear, they're different, right? If you think about female underwear, it's more like that, right? And male underwear is a little bit shorter. So if you think about the way the legs are attached from the side, right? They're kind of like that, right? If you think about underwear from the side, here's a pair of underwear from the side. It's like that, right? From the side. So that's how you should just think about the legs. Just think about an underwear shape and then attach the legs. So if I attach the legs, like this, and then this is the butt muscle, right? There'd be a little bit more of a thigh, like a little bit more muscle there. And then this part would be bone, and then the thigh muscle would come down from there. So that's kind of a side view. Hips are really, really hard. Like in my figure drawing class, I spend an entire day drawing the torso, drawing the boxes in different orientations. Really, really important because if you understand the hips, like a lot of my students will be like, oh, I don't need to draw the hips because I'm drawing a skirt. And you don't even see the hips. I'm just going to draw the torso, then I'm going to draw a skirt, and then I'm going to draw the legs. And I was like, no, 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 no. Draw me those hips underneath the skirt. I want to see what the hips are doing. It just forces people to really, really think about it, really, really think about the structure. So rib cages tilt in the opposite direction that the pelvis tilts in, right? So if the pelvis is tilting forward, your rib cage is generally tilting backwards. So if you feel the bottom of your ribs, right? Like the bony part of your ribs. There's the bony rib, okay? You can feel that the bottom of your rib. And then if you put your hand on if you put one finger on the bony part of your rib and one finger on the hip bones, you'll see that it's roughly about a hand distance, right? So if I'm putting my pinky right now on my hip bone and I'm putting my thumb on the bony part of my rib. Look at that distance. That distance is roughly the size of your hand, okay? And then the other side of the rib cage is like the back of your neck, okay? So go ahead and feel the back of your neck. If you feel the back of your neck, you will understand that the rib cage is tilting backwards. Okay. So if I was to draw in the chest on a female, it would kind of attach roughly there, right? You'll notice that chests from the side mimic a teardrop shape, okay? They don't do this. At least not natural ones, don't do this, right? Half circle versus half teardrop. Definitely more of a teardrop shape. And then you really get that opposing shape. Your arms will sort of attach here, right? Okay. So hopefully that answers your question. What's the best way to keep the proportions correct once filling in the final details? You just want to remember some key things. Like, let me pull up my drawing again, my initial reference. So I can post this on the server afterwards, but like, for proportions, it's really about the head size versus the torso size. So female heads are 1.5 times, the female rib cages are 1.5 heads large. Male rib cages are 2 times the size of the head. Female pelvises are roughly the size of the rib cage, whereas male pelvises are half the size of the rib cage, right? That's really it. In terms of like legs and arms, very similar. Male arms are obviously a little bit thicker, maybe a bit more muscular, more angles. But like the legs, the feet, the hands, the arms really are the same. Male necks tend to be thicker, female necks tend to be thinner. If your proportions look really wonky, it could also be because maybe the legs are a little bit too long. In my example, I made the legs longer than average, just to kind of mimic, more stylized, more anime proportions. This male, I would say, is probably about 6'4", judging by the size of his head and the length of his legs. Um, so, you can always, if you're drawing digitally, you can always make adjustments. So if I brought down his hips to about here, like if I just kind of transformed it and made it lower, then you can see if that looks right. Usually, if you're stylizing characters, right, you would just understand general proportions and then figure out how to change them, right? Or how to exaggerate them. Uh, do I have any recommendations for cleaning up sketch lines? Yeah, just practice your line art. I need to practice my line art, my digitally. My sketch lines are much cleaner traditionally, believe it or not. So uh, just practice. And I think there are also like smoothing tools or functions on the digital art programs that can help with the line art just to kind of smooth it out. All right. Nice work, guys. I really like seeing your artwork. All right. When drawing more dynamic poses, what is the best way to keep the proportions, like the measurements? Draw out your shapes. Draw out your wireframe. So actually, the next workshop next week, I will be doing another workshop, and it's going to be how to practice drawing dynamic poses. So you are in luck. If you want to practice drawing more dynamic poses, next week we'll be drawing from timed references so we can put these proportions into practice. Okay. You're welcome. Thank you. For those of you who have to go, nice having you here. Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. What is a good drawing device for a person who has a disability? Hmm. Do you mean a digital device? And what is the disability? Do you have any tips for drawing hands? We do. We're actually working on a video as we speak. It's going to be released in 2 weeks, and it's all going to be about how to draw hands from your own hand. So we're working on it. Just keep an eye on the channel. You can also Google hand tutorial winged canvas, and you will find our existing tutorials on hands. Jessie, one of our other creators, she's much better at digital art than I am. She has a full tutorial on drawing hands and hand poses, which is really, really helpful. It's one of our very popular videos. Oh, thank you, Vin, for posting that in the chat. Um, Thanks, guys. Yeah, and if you guys have any other questions and if you have any other suggestions, please let me know. We are planning, I am doing another workshop next week, and if there's other topics that interest you, that would be really helpful to know. You're welcome. It was my pleasure. Thank you guys for coming, and I will see you next time. Thank you. Thank you so much, XPPen, for inviting us to do this workshop.